Yeah. What was that thing you said? Oh, there we are. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And here he is on the other side of the Atlantic, Jacob Prasch. How you doing, Jacob?
Blessings in Jesus, dear friends. Wonderful to be with you.
Amen. Good to have you here, brother. And of course, I don't know where he's at exactly. Undisclosed location as of now. David Lister, he's on the West Coast. I know that.
Yep, up in Washington.
All right, Washington. All right. It's they say it's gorgeous, maybe a little bit warmer this time of year, but gorgeous nonetheless. And
We're
down
actually having 75-degree days and 55 nights. It's just such a heat wave.
such a heat wave. Watch out, sunblock. And down the freeway from my house, Jay, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Hello, everyone.
Jay, and of course down under, dear brother Davey. How you doing, Davey? Good morning.
Doing pretty good, thanks. Good to be here.
All right, Saturday morning, way ahead of us, and we want to welcome those who are watching from different parts of the world, from Australia, New Zealand. It's early in the morning. In the UK, good evening. Hope your supper went well. And here in the West Coast, of course, we're right in the middle of the day, and in the East Coast, a little bit in the afternoon on a Friday, people ready to go home and begin their weekend. We wanted to make you aware of a few things before we get started. As we welcome you from different platforms that you're on, we want to make some announcements in terms of Jacob's schedule, and he's got something that he wants to share with us. Go ahead, Jacob. You're going somewhere this August, so take it away.
From the 11th to the 21st of August, we shall be returning to South Africa, a country that has seen better days, to say the least, but there are still a number of believers there in all the communities. And we have a number of viewers and subscribers from South Africa. There's a Moriel branch there. And Ebion is still an ongoing mission project in South Africa. Of course, like anywhere else with COVID, there was a long hiatus of not being in South Africa. But we have had a number of requests to go back there. And I shall be going there, Lord willing, on the 11th of August is the first date. We have the schedule coming up. We'll announce it briefly. It'll also be posted on the Moriel Facebook page, the Moriel.org website, and a mail shot through Be Alert.
Amen. And of course, Jacob's going to be there for 10 days, 11th through the 21st. And Jacob, you're speaking in a couple of different places. This is a great part. So if you're in one of these areas, Jen, are they able to see the split screen right now?
Yes, they can see the split screen right now. I will go ahead and give the dates real quick since it's on my screen.
You got it, brother.
Forgive my pronunciation.
Bloemfontein
On Saturday the 12th, Sunday the 13th. We have the venue is the Ebenhauser Gemeente, and the address is 3 Kenilworth Road. All right. On Monday the 14th through Tuesday the 15th in Johannesburg, we have the Andaiberg Gemeente at 17th Lawley Avenue in Northcliffe. On Wednesday, the 16th through the 17th, Port Elizabeth, the Collegiate Girls High School at Ivy Leaf Hall, Main Security Gate, Kestrel Street, Parsons Hill. And on Saturday, the 19th, in Cape Town, the Oakdale Club, 80A Bloemhof Street in Belleville. And those are the venues that Jacob will be at.
That's awesome. So about
It will be posted on the Moriel website and social media platforms.
so about seven locations. So if you're anywhere in Bloemfontein, Joburg, Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, drop what you're doing, sell your shirt, go get an Uber. I don't know if they have Ubers there, and go see Jacob Prasch there. So that's going to be coming up. So it'll be exciting, Jake. You haven't been there in South Africa in a bit, right? It's been a while.
Since before COVID.
Okay. So I'm sure glad that they'll be seeing there. And then of course, Mike. Greetings to Mike and greetings to the believers there. Also, David Lister, you're not in South Africa, but you are in Washington State, just up north from here. And politics are no different, but you're there sharing and ministering to people. Where are you at this week, and where are you going to be this weekend?
You're muted.
Oh, we got David muted. Let's get him back on.
There we go.
There
Sorry.
we go. That's all right.
I'm in Bellingham, Washington. This is the last 2 days of the drive. And we'll be going back to Portland, where we're going to get with a number of people that for a last night on Sunday, get a final little get together. Met some very interesting people and characters and people that really desiring the fellowship that don't leave till midnight, man. They just don't want to go. So it's just what I understand it. So we're glad to do this, and so I'll soon be heading home. So prayers for travel mercies.
Amen. Amen. So you've been on the road for a little bit now, right? A week and a half or so?
16 days today. 15 days today.
Oh, so it is 2 weeks, more than 2 weeks. So that's awesome. Praise the Lord. So don't miss David, and the believers are being very encouraged. So praise the Lord for that. And we also want to let you know, not only does Moriel travel to different places, but we're also on podcasts. And just I'm going to turn it over to Jay. Jay, you have the schedule for this coming up on our podcast schedule, found everywhere. And as I always make a joke, Jacob's probably in more podcasts now than Joe Rogan, but you could be the judge of that. Go ahead, Jay.
All right. Well, for some reason it's not working, so I'm going to have to go to the actual PDF. Give me a second.
No worries.
So,
Very popular, actually. In a lot of ways, people prefer it because they can take it anywhere, and they can download it to their phone on their iPad. They can share it. Lots of things you can do with it. It's a wonderful thing, and we endeavor to get more podcasts on the schedule coming up for the end of the year into next year. Jay, you got it?
yes. So, to begin with, I'm going to start, since we're almost done with July, I'm going to start on Tuesday, the 1st of August. We have a Bible study with Sandy Simpson, 1 Corinthians 4. On Wednesday, we have Ken's Corner, episode 20, dropping. On Thursday, August 3rd, we have Jacob Prash's midweek Bible study, the Book of Exodus, Part 1, Introduction. You don't want to miss that. The Bible study for Exodus has been excellent. Really excellent.
Yeah, Thursdays. I think it's 11 Pacific time, Jay. Is that
Yes, join us. Also, we are posting the Zoom link on YouTube now. So if you would like to join the fellowship, Jacob actually lets ask a few questions after the Bible study, so it's a great Q&A session as well. On Friday, August 4th, we have Friday with Jacob, Preparing for Persecution Part 4. On Saturday, we have the Weekend Bible Study with Jacob, the Daggers of Satan. On Sunday, we have the Sunday Morning with Pastor Marco, the Book of Colossians, Put on Christ, Part 5. And then on Monday, this episode of Catching Up with Jacob will drop to the podcasts. Please make yourself available.
Yeah. No doubt, quite a busy schedule on the podcast. And they're found. Where can they find them, Jay?
Podcasts are on Deezer. They're on Amazon. They are on Apple, of course. You can find us on Spotify. Just look for Moriel Ministries, and you will find a plethora of podcasts to download.
Absolutely. So avail yourself of that and download them and put them in your files and keep them sharing. It's a wonderful thing. So we want to welcome those who are watching and those who will be watching later, those who are watching live on Rumble, those who are watching live on YouTube, of course, and Facebook Live. And of course, we got Vimeo and we have Telegram and of course our flagships, Moriel.tv, MorielTV.org. And of course, one platform that carries it, of course, is RTN TV. And that carries that as well. So lots to choices, but we're going to be going to away from YouTube and Facebook on our backstage. And we're going to be talking about backstage on a couple of things. It'll be very interesting, not only about Sodom and Gomorrah, but we're also going to be talking about some of the WorldCoin stuff that's going on, the CBDCs. And we talked about it last week, but as you know, it's not that we talked about it and made it famous, but the world is gravitating to this WorldCoin and UBI, and that's a big topic today. So we'll be talking a little bit on that, but definitely don't want to miss Backstage. We're not going to be on Facebook or on YouTube, so you're going to have to jump over to Rumble. If you want to ask questions, ask them in Rumble, and we'll get Jacob to answer some of these questions that always been great. In fact, people love the question and answer. It should be its own episode. But anyway, that's a whole different story. Not that we want to add more work to Jacob. So let's get started. And Jacob, let's catch up. We're not going to be talking about a few things, but I think they're worthy to mention. The fact that Fox News, of course, have been caught matching donations to Satanic Temple. That's part of their charity organizations that they love to give. But New Mexico government, the actual state of New Mexico here in the state, reportedly referring women to the Satanic Temple health program. That's bizarre, but I wouldn't put it past them. That's exactly what they think about. And of course, well, now I should say Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, now a new appointed role at Harvard, a role of censorship, like a censorship czar. So she's a championing censorship, and we all know how that worked out in New Zealand. And those who watch in New Zealand here can attest to that. Can attest definitely to that. And Bill, we look forward to seeing the believers in Australia and New Zealand when we get there in November. We're not going to be talking about what NBC calls the triple-demic. A brutal winter, say it's coming because we have a new variant, and we're going to have to get shots for that. And but we do want to talk about something that it is about as deadly as any variant. U.S. politicians. Jacob, you and I watched some videos of some pretty damning evidence that these guys are absolutely either out of their mind because they lost it, or they're out of their mind because they're just such hateful group of people. I couldn't imagine any more hateful group of people or any worthless group of people than Congress. But at the same time, I'm also torn because I also know the Constitution and the reality of what Congress was supposed to be there for, but they vacated that a long time ago. McConnell, Feinstein, Omar, you name it. I wouldn't give you 5 cents or a bag of chips for them. But Jacob, tell me what you saw and your reaction to that.
The first thing we see is the folly of geriatric politicians who are not exactly compos mentis or in control of their faculties being animated by their political handlers of the party. We saw this week with Mitch McConnell, a Republican. We've seen it consistently with Biden. Now, there are people of some age who are, in fact, in control of their faculties, Donald Trump being one. It was interesting that the mainstream media and the political left were trying to say when Mr. Trump was in office that he was suffering early onset dementia, but he has shown no clinical symptoms of it, none whatsoever. Biden will not even submit to the tests. Hence, we see the dual standards and the hypocrisy. So the first thing we see this week is the reality of the first dual standard we see is one standard for Trump, another standard for Biden. And Dianne Feinstein is likewise, the woman is obviously losing it. The woman is obviously losing it. They have no capacity to fulfill their function. And other countries see it. Other countries see these elderly people being manipulated who shouldn't even be there. It is a complete and utter joke. It reminds me of the old men in the Kremlin in the last days of the Soviet Union. You know, people who are vestiges of an age gone by, who were always corrupt, and who were there simply because they have always been there. I mean, Suslav, Brezhnev, Cherenko, Andropov, all of these people, they were just a lot of old men from the Stalinist era who were left over, who had power. Well, now you've seen the same thing in the United States. And again, two standards. And by the way, I do not want to see Donald Trump be the next president, although I would certainly take him over Biden or Gavin Newsom or something. But I personally am no longer a Donald Trump supporter politically. But there's still dual standards here. Secondly, the second thing that we see, can you imagine if a Caucasian member of Congress made the blatantly racist statements as Congresswoman Olmert, the radical Muslim, I believe she's an enemy of America. I believe she has no right to even be in the country, let alone in Congress. She
I
should
agree.
be denationalized and deported. She's reported to have married her brother to get her brother a green card. Married her brother. This woman is perverted, and she's not just anti-Zionist, but anti-Semitic. But she can make those statements and get a pass. That if a white politician ever made those statements, they would be castigated, and rightly so. But because she's a woman, and because she's a Muslim, and because she's black, she gets a pass. Utter hypocrisy. Now we see this week, they're going again for further indictments of Mr. Trump and some of his staff. How can you try to indict somebody for things they were already impeached for and found not guilty?
Yeah.
This is utter desperation. These are creatures of the swamp. They are swamp rats. They are the rats of the swamp, both Republican and Democrat. You have Republican swamp rats who want to preserve the swamp. I mean, Romney, obviously.
Yeah.
John Cornyn from Texas is another one. These are rats of the swamp who are trying to preserve their contaminated environment, that is Washington, inside the Beltway. The mainstream media, they are swamp rats trying to preserve the swamp. And they detest anybody who will drain it. You're taking away their habitat of corruption and hypocrisy. So they will do anything, including with political motivation, weaponize the judiciary for a political end. When you have a case with Hunter Biden and now his father, where there is plainly indictable reason for full-fledged federal prosecutions of father and son, they want a sweetheart honey deal, easy way out, play it down, mainstream media ignores it when there's hard evidence.
That's right. That's right.
But when it was with Donald Trump and they had impeachments, people who should die in federal prison if there was any real justice, impeaching a president for something that never happened. A corrupt FBI that obtains FISA warrants based on material they knew to be fraudulent, forgeries. No indictments or investigations of Hillary Clinton or John Podesta. Why are people like Comey not under indictment, or Strzok, or these other people? Why were they not indicted? Even Mueller, who's no friend of Donald Trump, couldn't find anything. Yet you had these ridiculous women on The View speaking about it as if it was a fact. You had Rachel Maddow speaking about it as it was a fact. You had Chuck Todd speaking about it as if it was a fact. John Scarborough speaking about it as if it was a fact and it never happened. But when you have something that definitely did happen, everybody knows it happens, including a serious federal weapons violation.
Yeah.
There's no indictment. There's a sweetheart deal. Sweep it under the rug. Forget about it. This is just corruption on steroids, hypocrisy on steroids. And what troubles me is there's enough people who will remain apathetic and enough people who are still stupid enough to vote for corruption, to preserve the swamp. They're on the side of the rats. The rats want to preserve the swamp because that's their habitat. That is how they survive. And they don't want anything threatening their habitat.
No, very true. Hey, David, did you see Feinstein? You know, she's being told by her aide, just say yes, just say yes. And of course, McConnell's lost it, and he's 81 now. But the charges against Trump, as Jacob was talking about, what do you think about all this? What's your take on term limits on politicians, drug testing them? And of course, what in the world are they going to do if Trump gets arrested, which could happen next week? We lose David? I think you're muted, David.
The only time we have seen term limits is when Congress imposed them in on the presidency. They'll never impose them on themselves. They love, once they get into the club, not ever being put out of the club. And so now you see people like Feinstein, who has basically been controlled by her handlers for a number of years. And so I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't run again unless they have somebody else that they can put in there. But I lost hope decades ago of considering term limits. It's always been like this. My congressman is the best. It's all the others that are the problem, and that's the way people vote, because those congressmen are bringing money into their districts and everything. So as long as money is the center of these things, of Congress and power and greed, there isn't any hope for good politicians. They're handling her, telling her what to vote, got her in the seat till they're ready to find the right person to replace her. And so, like Biden, he's out of it, McConnell's out of it, but they say they're fine. Whether they give them drugs, pump them up with new blood, I don't know what they're doing to keep them animated, but it's
the right word.
really sad. And young people are saying we need the old generation to step away, because they're ready for something else, but it'll probably be worse.
Yeah, I was going to ask you this. Okay, you get rid of the McConnells, the Feinsteins, they're older, they can't function. What's behind it? Omar, Tlaib? I mean, what's the future?
You'll get even more liberal, because the young people want the liberalism, thinking that it brings them freedom, when actually it will bring them slavery.
The slavery, yeah. Jacob, you got this 60-page indictment filed by Jack Smith, who's the prosecutor, of course, yes. And he's even adding that to the defendant, the maintenance guy, Carlos de Oliveira, and I don't even know what to tell you, because it's so deranged, it's so crazy. It's basically they got him for alteration, destruction, concealment, and selling of evidence. What will happen if he gets arrested? I mean, I'm sure the media is going to be front page.
Obviously, this is a case where you take somebody who, these things are not even within his brief. He was a maintenance man, a working guy, and you bring these things against him that he probably only partially understands, does not see himself as guilty of anything, and his lawyers will advise him, they hope, to turn state's evidence, to give some testimony against Donald Trump, his former boss. That's the hope. This kind of prosecution is politically motivated intimidation of a simple man, of an ordinary person, somebody who's not a professional politician. That's what it is. Again, but it reflects their desperation. The rats need to preserve the swamp. They have nowhere else to go. That's their habitat. Without the swamp, there'd be no reason to have MSNBC or CNN. Yeah. Without the swamp, there'd be no reason, there'd be no raison d'etre for people like Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or Mitt Romney. They need the swamp. It's their habitat that's under threat. What would you do to protect your only home if you have nowhere else to go? Well, that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what they're doing, politically weaponizing the judiciary for this purpose.
Yeah. What would you think it would happen if he gets arrested, though? I mean, the people would react to this. I would imagine some form of protest would happen. I mean, this is by far probably the most damning thing that they've ever done to any president.
The Rasmussen, Freudian slip, the Rasmussen poll from yesterday said that most voters do not think it'll make a difference. The establishment are hoping it would make a difference, but they can only control the public to a certain degree. They can't control all of it.
Very true. Now, from one thing to another, right? So we're going to move away from the political swamp to something that the political, members of the swamp want to promote, and nothing like this have I seen. And I've never seen the fear mongering. These are some of the statements from the White House, from Biden, from the media. Hell on earth. Test the limit of survival. Record heat ever recorded on Earth. Of course, Biden goes to Phoenix and basically first ever hazard alert for heat ever done. And he's talking about painting your roof white. He's talking nonsense. But at the same time, he wants to minimize the use of air conditioning. He wants to take away generators because it's a big issue with climate change. And this is the big thing now. Climate change, climate change. Look at the heat. Look what's going on. Record heat ever recorded. Other nations have done it. Australia, I think, is a big proponent of this, especially Andrews down in Victoria. But where is this climate change hysteria going? Are we heading toward climate change lockdowns?
Well, they would like to, because it's like the pandemics. They are means of political and population control. You can get away with things in evasion of democratic process and procedure by declaring emergencies.
Yeah.
This has always been done with wars, with dog wagging, as it's called. It's been done with pandemics. Now they'll do it with the environment. It's just the government looking to autocratically and dictatorially seize power without any accountability to the electorate or their representatives by saying it's necessary due to a manufactured emergency. You mentioned Australia. Australia is largely desert. I've been there many times. I've been to Alice Springs. I've been to places in Australia many Australians have not. That country, it seems to me it's mostly desert per square mile. Not all of it, but most of it certainly seems to be, from what I've seen, and I've seen a lot of Australia. Okay, United States, well, the Southwest or Arizona, it's a desert. Southeastern California is the high desert. So when you get to Palm Springs, it's desert. Death Valley, Death Valley. They call it Death Valley for a reason. So let's look now at reality. I was in Eilat, Israel. I lived in Israel for a number of years, and I was in Eilat, not Israel, and I was in Ein Gedi, where King David hid from King Saul in the cave of Ein Gedi. You can see soldiers frying eggs on the hood of a Jeep, using the hood of a Jeep for a skillet to fry eggs for their breakfast in the morning. It is so hot. You can get to be, if you can believe it, temperatures that can go to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. This happens in Saudi Arabia. It happens in much of the Sahara. It certainly happens in Israel. These things have always been around. Additionally, we cannot take their statistics for granted. They've lied too many times. We've had scientists being suppressed in providing accurate data. They've been told not to. You have, not once but twice, East Anglia University, which did the climate research and environmental temperature for the planet research for the United Nations. Not once but twice, caught lying, deliberately lying. They present lies as if they were facts. The left is great at that. Not only the left, but certainly the left is great at that. We had something that this, I don't know if she's really that stupid or she's just that corrupt or both, that Ketanji Brown on the Supreme Court made some kind of a statement about the survivability of premature Black infants in American hospitals if the doctors are also Black, by taking one study about one instance in Florida and making a template out of it. But when you look at the overall statistics, the survivability rate of Black infants is just as high as Caucasians. I mean, they have no problem distorting statistics and interpreting them dishonestly. And they have no problem just lying. And they're doing that about the environment.
Yeah.
They all do it. They all do it. They lie about gender inequity in terms of wages. They just lie about it. They don't tell you that a disproportionately large amount of women getting university educations get degrees in things like gender studies or something that's useless. Not enough women go into high-tech fields or high-tech entrepreneurial fields where the major money is. Some women do, most do not. But that you don't count that. You don't look at the reasons. You just say There's inequity in the labor market. Men make more than women. This is not. What about the reasons for it?
Yeah, exactly.
They just lie. They lie. They distort the facts. That it's not just a distortion or a misrepresentation. It is a lie. And lie they do. And lie they will.
Yeah. Hey, David, I wanted to ask you this. In the midst of all this, Biden creates a new permanent Office of Pandemic Preparedness and Response Policy, which is crazy, long acronym, basically signaling something may be done regarding, heat waves, maybe another pandemic. Are we heading that direction again? It just seems like he's laying down the groundwork to say, hey, we got some problems. Now we have an office that deals with masks, it deals with lockdowns, it deals with vaccinations. So maybe they're going to work in concert with the WHO and CDC. But I don't think it's ever been done by any White House, any office. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, of course, they're getting ready. We've been talking here for a couple of years on the events that they've got planned for us as far as total lockdown of people from moving around the world, for getting rid of planes, everything that everybody mocked AOC about early on the environment. That's the agenda. They want 15-minute cities. They want to have you a passport, ID. All this is coming. So this is just, again, setting groundwork. Oh, we're being prepared. We know bad things can happen. So it makes them sort of look like they know what they're doing. But just like Jacob talked about the East Anglia University being caught twice for lying. Look, Al Gore's hockey stick of how hot it got, that was a total fabrication. A lot of the facts there were debunked. A few years back, they said that the Arctic ice was melting so fast and terrible. They sent a research ship down there, and all of a sudden it got locked into the summer ice, and they had to get 4 different icebreakers to get them out. It was so thick and so widely caught.
I remember that because they actually said, and I think I have the article somewhere, no more ice in the caps, the polar caps by 2013. No more ice by 2013.
Their predictions is basically, if you have been following environmental lockdown, what they're trying to do and what they're trying to propose is basically they want to be able to control the people. And one way is to scare them to death that all these people are going to die from this heat. Well, in the American South, we know in the summertime it gets hot.
Man,
and you make provisions. But just a few years back in Europe, they had something like 600 or 700 people die in one summer. Okay, well, where's the deaths this year? It's hotter, right? They say it's hotter.
It's supposed to be hotter,
one thing doesn't add up with the other thing. And again, it's just scaremongering to get people into fear. If you get people fearful, you can control them. And, so make your plans. It's just these people are transferring wealth from our generation, taking it from the next generation and putting it in old people's pocket. If people were smart, they would get better thinking about environmental concerns.
No, I wanted to quote something. This is it's one thing when Biden does it and we all laugh at Biden and the crazy things he says, and he's trying to paint the roofs white on people's houses, and he said that's going to cure it. But this is from the UN. This is Antonio Gutierrez, the United Nations Secretary. The end of global warming, the era of global warming has ended. It is now global boiling. So the guy's little phrases like this, right? And then you have Ursula.
Did he say that in his air-conditioned office?
Pretty much so. The ones that he has and he doesn't want you to have, right?
Yeah,
that's how it goes. Right. But the UN is getting involved. UN is getting involved to make it a mandated climate for the whole world. And of course, the EU Green Deal that we talked about it with Jacob for Europe. President Ursula von der Leyen, I think that's how you pronounce it. She wants to decarbonize all of Europe. I don't know if she means the UK as well, but all of Europe. and she wants this climate change, Green Deal, and we can laugh about it, and we can say these people are absolutely out of their mind. But I will tell you this: talking to young people, they all believe it.
Yes.
I don't think there's not many younger people that obviously I'm getting older, but my kids, my kids, their age, their friends, some a little bit older, they believe that there's about 12 years and the world is going to end. So they're doing radical things. They're chaining themselves to roads. They're destroying paintings along the way. They don't want to have kids because I've seen signs here in California and Texas. Make love, not babies. Not have population growth. Save the climate. Have an abortion. Those kinds of signs, because they don't want the population to grow. They think this is going to be detrimental to the world. And of course, they want to reduce population. That's really some of their things that they've said. So, we'll start with David. We'll go to Jacob. They've really brainwashed a whole group of people into thinking this world is going to end. The end of the world is here. So it's up to us to save the world.
Marco, I think Jay had something. Did you have something, Jay, you wanted to put in?
That's good.
Yeah. Mm. Isn't that crazy? Oh no, that's we can't include that data in there.
But
I
could
remember
add-
when they were talking about polar bears that they were going to die. There was about 20,000 of them, early, I think it was 1980, 1989 or something like that, that it was absolutely they were going to die. Now there's over 70,000 polar bears. They're thriving in that area. Hey, I just wanted to mention real quick, I was told that Rumble is muted, so if you guys can look at that real quick, as they wanted to hear what Jay had to say. We may have to have Jay repeat that again. Go ahead, David.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you remember about 25 years ago, maybe we had this thing go out over the ocean called El Nino, and it made some parts of America below average and other parts hotter. I mean, in Pittsburgh, it was great, man, for summer. But then I noticed down south it was very hot. But early on, they only mentioned it once or twice in the weather reports, but we're in an El Nino situation again. And now we're seeing this it dips. I mean, like, we're having gorgeous weather up here in the Washington and the Northwest, but then it dips down, and that's where they're having all this heat. So this is just the same thing, only they don't talk about it. This is the earth is boiling.
Yes,
boiling. It's always changing. They lie about it and get it wrong, but never admit it's wrong. But they just add on more fear and more fear, and at the end, it's to control people, to be able to take their freedoms away, take away their ability to decide on their course of life, and.
Absolutely. If you guys do want to watch, we did a whole segment with Jacob on Backstage. I think it was last week or the week before. I think it was 2 weeks ago, on what that means, and biblically speaking, prophetically, because that's something to do with the environment in the Book of Revelation. Jay,
yes, take two.
Verbatim. Can you go back and
yes,
for a Rumble? Thank you,
guys. I can do take two. Sorry about that. My fault. I pressed the wrong button. So what I was saying is, if you take climate change and you divorce it from reality, which is history, you can sell anything you want. The truth of the matter is, if you look at the Battle of Monmouth in June 28, 1778, if you read the historical account, there was a heat wave going through New Jersey where temperatures were above 100 degrees in New Jersey. If you look at today's temperatures in New Jersey, the average between June and July is anywhere from 80 to 86 degrees. Now, if you don't know this history, that there are heat waves and really severe heat waves in New Jersey, you would just assume that, climate change was worse in 1778 when there's no combustion engine, no factories, no mass pollution, no overpopulation, according to the frantic people. That's what they do. They give you data based upon doctor data that they have that is completely devoid of any historical context, and they sell you climate change.
Yeah, and to the point where people are really making, it's just kids are making decisions about life based on this hysteria, and the end of the world is here. And of course, it's one thing when, we can joke about it and say how silly it is to believe that, but they really do have these crazy ideas like dimming the sun. This is from the White House, that they want to take Bill Gates' idea of dimming the sun and, spraying stuff in the air. Literally, the White House said they're spraying stuff in the air, dimming the sun. And we have no concept of what they will do to food supplies, to the climate, to food production. It is an absolute disaster, and literally, it will be absolutely lethal.
To your point, Marco, what is that going to do to the millions of animals on the earth that use the sun to determine if they're nocturnal or they work during the day to find their food?
Yeah. And it goes back to the book of Revelation, right? What Jacob was talking about last time about those who destroy the earth. Imagine deal those who destroy the earth.
Revelation, a third of the day and a third of the night will disappear.
That is interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Now, of course, we're talking absolute nonsense, right? Because Yuval Harari has come out and said there's nobody doing these things. There's no secret group or cabal that is really affecting the world. I mean, that is just nonsense. He's a historian. He's gay. He is an Israeli Tel Aviv resident. So you got to trust everything he says because he's Yuval Harari and he works for the World Economic Forum as their prophet. I want to play a video. What's that?
For our betterment.
Oh, yeah. So I want to play this video. There's back-to-back videos. I think we agreed to play these two videos right here. Just want to play Harari. There's one video, and then we'll go to the next one and just listen to what he had to say.
What are global cabal theories, and why do so many people believe them?
The global cabal theory, it has many variations, but basically there is a small group of people, a small cabal, that secretly controls everything that is happening in the world. All the wars, all the revolutions, all the epidemics, everything that is happening is controlled by this very small group of people who are, of course, evil and have bad intentions. And this is a very well-known story. That it's not new. It's been there for thousands of years. It's very attractive because, first of all, it's simple, and also it creates this fantasy, utopian fantasy. If we only get rid of the small cabal, we solve all the problems of the world. Salvation, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the war in Ukraine, the epidemics, poverty, everything is solved just by knocking out this small cabal. Now, as a historian, the most important thing I can say about these theories, they are never right, because the global cabal theory says two things. First, everything is controlled by a very small number of people. Secondly, these people hide themselves. They do it in secret. Now, both things are nonsense. It's impossible for people to control, a small group of people, to control and predict everything, because the world is too complicated.
All right, so that's what he says. Well, look what they do.
Yes, when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains. And I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers. Is it imaginable?
That within, say, 50 years, people will literally be part of a network. All the bodies, all the brains would be connected together to a network, and you won't be able to survive if you're disconnected from the net, because your own body parts, your own immune system perhaps depends on being constantly connected to the colony, to the network. The new powers that we are gaining now, especially the powers of biotechnology and artificial intelligence, are really going to transform us into gods.
Interesting. Jacob, let's start with you. Any thoughts on that and what they are doing and ultimately will be doing? Where is it?
Well, first of all,
the government is in possession
Sorry,
of
Jacob.
potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your
There we go.
First of all, Moriel has always warned about conspiracy theories, and we've been particularly warned about those who are referred to in Isaiah chapter 8, who attempt to make what amounts to conspiracy theories into a matter of biblical end-time prophecy or discernment. We've warned about people like that, and this element exists, and they do discredit people who attempt to take and make an objective analysis of what's really transpiring in the world. But Isaiah says, don't believe, he doesn't say don't believe in conspiracies. He says, don't believe that everything these people say is a conspiracy. There are conspiracies. There have always been conspiracies. There's never been a time when history was not infused with conspiracy. There's always been that. Look at our time. The mainstream media at the time tried to portray in the 1960s, after the assassination of JFK, they tried to portray Barry Goldwater as a war hawk who was going to get us into deep trouble in Southeast Asia and Vietnam. Well, that was what the media was doing, and that's how he was being portrayed. At the same time, McNamara, Lyndon Johnson, Hubert Humphrey, Maxwell Taylor, Dean Rusk, the Johnson administration were planning to expand the Vietnam War into the imbroglio that it became without a declaration of war. There's always been conspiracies like this. There's always been conspiracy. Don't call everything a conspiracy because someone says it is. But when you have obvious evidence, you have to look at it. Now let's look at what we just watched. Notice Harari, a homosexual from Israel, who's a professor of history, and he is not a data scientist. He denies the reality of cabals and conspiracies. But then you see him, and you see Schwab, whom he advises, doing the very thing he says they don't do. You've got to be absurd to pay attention to people like him. My concern is, as David Lister's pointed out, the young people. They subscribe to it. This is what happens when you have a school system and a teachers union that's a political campaign fund for the Democratic Party, and a school system that is not there to educate but to indoctrinate.
That's right.
That is not to teach people how to think, but what to think. They believe in global warming, which is simply a diversion away from the real issues of conservation and pollution, which are valid issues. It diverts away from that. So in order to divert away from the real issues of pollution and conservation, by looking at what China is doing as the world's biggest polluter with thermal pollution, to take focus away from that, we have to put the focus on us instead and talk about global warming. It's just a lie, but they've been hoodwinked by a school system. They've been brought up to believe it, and they've been brought up not to question. It's very much, it's very much like the Soviet school system, which was basically there for reasons of propaganda and controlling the minds of youth. The Hitler Youth were the same way. You had the Hitler Youth, you had the Stalin Youth, and now you have the Biden Obama Youth. It's the same thing. It works the same way. That is the reality of it. If somebody was taught how to think instead of what to think, they would say, wait a minute, why did we not have epidemics and pandemics like this before? Why do we need these new regulations and suspension of democratic freedom to cope with a pandemic? Why weren't they around before? The last one was the Spanish flu in the early 20th century. That killed a lot of people, but medical science and immunology was not nearly as developed as it is now. Why didn't it happen before? But in order to arrive at that conclusion, or even to ask that question, you have to have been trained how to think, not what to think. The propaganda machine of the education system, in league with the mainstream media and government and the White House, the liars of the White House, is if you question this, you're unscientific. You're denying the scientific reality. No, they're denying the scientific reality that just like El Nino, you have normal changes in weather that are cyclical. They are ignoring the scientific reality of X and Y chromosomes. They are ignoring scientific realities in genetic science and environmental science. But they're telling you you're not scientific. They did the same thing with Darwinism. If you don't agree with Darwinism, you're not scientific. But they will not look at the fact that there's no transmutation of nucleic acids across the genus barrier and the natural environment. You're not allowed to know how to think. You have to be told what to think. It is our worthless education system. And that goes from the neighborhood public school or state school in America all the way up to Ivy League institutions. This is the problem. The children, the youth are taught what to think, not how to think. They're indoctrinated, not educated. And the media keeps people stupid. That's the main purpose of mainstream media, is to keep people stupid.
Hey, Marco.
Go ahead, David.
One thing that I see that the Democrats do on all this is virtual signaling. They try to say, oh, we're doing this for the common good for everybody. But behind their scenes, everything, all their plans are for evil. And people can't distinguish. It's like when we're told to watch out for wolves as Christians. We're supposed to reach a point in our Christian life where we're mature, we're able to distinguish between good and evil and right and wrong. But the world is totally lacking in discernment, and even though they're getting fooled over and over and over again with the same virtual signaling that this is for your benefit, this is for your good, this is for the common good. But in reality, they're doing what is evil, and people can't distinguish, can't discern.
No.
Led to the slaughter.
Yeah, they can discern. And for the most part, JB, you brought up the believers and how we're supposed to discern. And obviously the believers are the only ones that can discern spiritually what's going on in the world. Question to Jacob, and then we'll go to David. Has the church completely lost its relevance in terms of being salt and light on the earth? Because people just fall for anything right now. There's really no restraint in society in terms of, how to think critically, how to look at things spiritually, how to, just even logic or even restraint of evil. Jacob, we'll go to you first. What's the church worth now?
Church is worth what Jesus said it's worth. Nothing other than to be trampled underfoot. The salt has lost its taste, and the light has all but flickered out. And we're not just talking about the World Council of Churches and the Vatican and the papacy, etc. Those things have always been theologically and spiritually bankrupt. I mean what used to be called evangelicism. The mainstream evangelical denominations are nearly as bad, and in some cases just as bad. It's over. It's over. The future of the church will be the faithful church. It'll be ultimately an underground church awaiting for the return of the Lord, and in the meantime, busying itself with hastening his coming, because nothing else is going to stop this. Now, that's not to say that I do not believe that we should vote and pray and so forth. We should. But the way it's going, it has gone too far. We have crossed the Rubicon. We have crossed the point. Western civilization has crossed the point of no return. There is nothing going to reverse what has transpired and the consequences other than the return of Jesus.
So we're talking American church has no cultural influence in England, in Europe. I mean, you went to Europe.
Look at Stephen Furtick. What would anybody in their right mind think of somebody who says, I am God Almighty? Look at Andy Stanley, someone who denies the fun. He's a Marcionite. He's a theological Marcionite.
Yeah, that is true.
Even unsaved people know these people are crazy or that they're crooked.
Yeah. The major pastors in America by ranking, I think it's Andy Stanley, Joel Osteen, Rick Warren, Stephen Furtick, top four. I think there's a fifth one, might be another guy in Virginia. But these are the people that are looked upon as leaders of the church and influence society with the gospel and righteousness.
They're not leaders of the body of Christ. They are leaders of a corpse.
Yeah.
The real body of Christ are increasingly people meeting in homes and small groups and relating to other groups who meet online and things of this nature. There is less and less place for true faithful believers who love Jesus in denominational churches. That is even more true in Great Britain and Europe, but it's certainly true in the United States as well, and Australia, and New Zealand, and Canada.
Yeah.
David, you're up in you're up in the Northwest. What do you see? I mean, you gave us a little bit of a report last week, but is there any cultural influence? I mean, even minimal, the churches up in the Northwest.
Well, I went through, Mia and I, her son, walked through a lot of the towns down here before the meetings and things. And the culture, if there's a cultural influence, it's on the liberal left on everything, everywhere. It's churches, the United Methodist churches there were into Black Lives Matter, love is love. Every wicked thing that could be brought there is residing there and welcoming everything in the church. This was many churches there, pride flags everywhere, and you see people walking around that just they're oblivious to it. Witchcraft of the Pentagon. They had a Pinnacle theater.
Pentagram, yeah.
Everywhere you could go. It's just there's no good. When the salt has lost its saltiness, it's only good to be thrown out and trampled underfoot.
Question.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Okay, so the American church seems to be informed in terms of we have much information. We have lots of Bibles. We have lots of research. We have lots of commentaries. And it should be prepared for the cultural battles that we face, the spiritual battles that we face. But why isn't the church addressing any of the issues? I mean, we're talking largely silent by pastors. They don't even want to talk about the issues that are prevalent and real relevant to society in terms of sexuality, in terms of creation, in terms of righteousness, in terms of the love of God. Does God even exist? That kind of questions that people may have in society. Jacob, why aren't they even unwilling to address it? It's all about feel good, cast the demon out, that kind of stuff.
Jesus gave us the answer to that question as to what the last church would be like. It's something that I wrote a book about. It's something that others have spoken about well before me, and it's something that Moriel has had as one of its basic guiding principles. Why? Here is why. To the angel of the church of Laodicea write, the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of creation of God says this, I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich, affluence, and have become wealthy and have need of nothing. You do not know that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. Watch Kenneth Copeland for 2 minutes if you can avoid vomiting. I advise you to buy from me gold refined by fire, that you may become rich, as God counts riches, and white garments that you may clothe yourself, and that the shame, the disgrace of your nakedness, not having the garments of salvation, may not be revealed. And eye salve to anoint your eyes that you may see. Remember, Laodicea's problem is it doesn't know it's Laodicea. It is spiritually blind. The last church is spiritually blind. They are blind. They cannot see. And the reason they cannot see is because they would not see.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Any thoughts on that, David? I'm moving to the next subject. But
Yeah, just real quickly, the millions upon tens of millions that are in churches today are following false teachers that are blind, and they're both going into the ditch, and they don't even know it. Like, you're so right, Jacob, on the blindness that's happening. They can't even see.
Because they would not be
Well, there's none so blind as those that don't want to see.
That's right. So Jacob wrote a whole book on it, The Dilemma of Laodicea. I think we got some videos on it. I think we're going to post one of them on Tuesday. So great point, Jacob. And I wanted to bring this up because of just some of the major deceptions that are coming in the world and are coming to the world, happening already, but coming to the world. And the church won't be able to discern, but won't be able to lead anybody to righteousness, as Daniel chapter 12 talks about. We ought to lead people to righteousness. And this is by far probably the most outlandish things that I've heard, but this is what's happening now. According to a whistleblower, he is of course, a intelligence officer, testified before the Congress, before the House Oversight Committee, that not only are UFOs real, but basically under oath, the government has non-human bodies that have been recovered by the government from crashed crafts. This is not an episode of, some sci-fi series. This is legitimate. This is before a House of Oversight Committee. David Grush testified. They have them. They're biological, non-human. This is, of course, on top of what the Pentagon said, what other Congress hearings have said, that the UFOs are real, that we have them. Now, this is about to make every conspiracy theorist and sci-fi, devotee go absolutely crazy. See, I told you so. But it also creates a big problem. If there is a revelation of alien life of some sort, which will obviously be the ultimate deception. Jacob, what are we up against here? If the governments of the world, plural, come out and said, yes, it's true, we have them, we did it, and we have to rethink the way our society and not creation, but the beginnings of humanity.
I was not the only one and probably not the first one, but since the 1970s, I have been warning that extraterrestrial phenomena are going to be something that the Antichrist and false prophet are going to use to deceive the nations and even much of the so-called church. I have been warning about this since the 1970s. There's no doubt. These signs that he's calling down in the heaven, the scriptures tells us it'll be just as it was in the days of Noah. The final straw that broke the camel's back was the Nephilim when they procreated with human women. Now, I know there's conspiracy theorists saying all kinds of crazy things about the Nephilim. I'm just looking at what the Bible says and what Jesus said, just as it was in the days of Noah. You are going to see what you already have in Satanism, sexual conjugation between the demonic and the corporal and the human. Okay, this takes place in satanic rituals and worship, where you have surrogate sexuality with demons and things of this nature. This went on in the ancient world, where animals like goats were consecrated to demons, and this happened
like
in
pan worship,
pan worship, other things that has always been around. But you're going to see it in the last days in a way that we've never seen it before. I am absolutely positive since the 1970s that extraterrestrial phenomena is going to be part of the great final deception.
Jacob, quick question on this. How do you feel when you say that you've been talking about this and warning about the 1970s in terms of vindication? I mean, there's not a huge victory in terms of how you feel about it, but do you feel like, look, I've been talking about this and the church doesn't listen? What's your take on this?
Yesterday was Tisha B'Av. When you read what Jeremiah wrote in the book of Lamentations on Tisha B'Av, that all of his warnings happened. He wasn't going around saying, I told you so. If you read Lamentations, he's lamenting.
Yeah.
This never should have happened.
Hmm.
I think we need to be more like Jeremiah than blowing our own horn and self-vindication and saying, I told you so. People knew Jeremiah told them so. He didn't have to say that. And I think those who've told the truth are going to be vindicated.
Yeah.
And I'm not speaking only about myself by any means.
Yes.
Church history is filled with people who foretold the future, what would happen to the church. J.C. Ryle being one of them for the Anglicans, Charles Spurgeon being one for the Baptists, John Wesley being one for the Methodists. Everything that these saints of God said was going to happen to the denominations that they even were instrumental in either founding or leading have happened. But there's no need for I told you so's. Yes, they did tell us so, but that's obvious. A matter for lamentation, not a matter for self-vindication.
Yeah.
Very good.
Hey,
David,
Marco,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just look, Jacob and I grew up, and one of the things we always said is don't trust the government, because they're probably lying to you. Now I trust them even less. Even I didn't trust them then, but look, I could easily see. I've seen fake meat being grown in petri dishes.
Yep.
So can something non-human be grown and made as a prop as alien by mixing whatever? Yeah. I don't know what science can do. Also, I know that they're mixing metals and all sorts of different things today because of advanced research. So they could produce something and say it's that this is not human technology. So I just don't trust. I'm going to keep trusting in the Lord, and they can produce their stuff, but I just don't trust them, and I would question authority. We used to say, Jacob, don't trust anyone over 30. Now we don't trust anybody under 30.
Right. Just final thoughts. We're just coming down to the end of catching up before we move to backstage. Just the subject of Israel and the nations. Jacob, you just did a video on Tisha B'Av that's going to come out in a couple of days regarding Tisha B'Av. But Israel marks the saddest day in their calendar. This is according to the rabbis, basically the 9th of Av. And they have this mourning and they have a 25-hour fast. And before people watch the video, can you give us a preview of what you talked about, just very quickly, a synopsis of what Tisha B'Av is, why Israel should we pay attention to this? Because I want to tie it into what's really happening in Israel now.
Sure. The Babylonians destroyed the first temple in 585 BC, as predicted by Jeremiah, on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of the month of Av, which by the Hebrew calendar we are presently in. The Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 AD, according to the predictions of Jesus and Daniel, on the exact same day, bearing in mind that Peter in his epistle associates Rome with Babylon. She was in Babylon greets you. So both temples in 70 AD, 585 BC were destroyed on that day. It is a day of loss of Jewish religious significance in their thinking when their houses of worship were both destroyed that day. However, a number of events in both Jewish and global history took place on Tisha B'Av, bearing in mind it goes by the lunar calendar, not the solar calendar or Gregorian calendar or Julian calendar. The Jews were expelled from England in 1290. on Tisha B'Av, not by any design of the king of King Edward who kicked them out, but it happened to Tisha B'Av. The Jews were expelled from England. The Jews were expelled from Spain, launching the Spanish Inquisition in the end of the 15th century, Tisha B'Av. World War I and World War II in Europe both began on Tisha B'Av. It is a day of tragedy. Some of the greatest tragedies in Jewish history, but in human history, have commenced that day. On the teaching that we did it on RTN on Word for the Weekend. It'll be out tomorrow night on Word for the Weekend, and it'll be out after that on Moriel. I apply what happened to Israel and the Jews on Tisha B'Av to what's presently happening in the Western Church, most particularly in Great Britain at the present time, due to certain constellation of events transpiring in the United Kingdom. So that is it. It'll be on Moriel in a few days. It'll be on RTN tomorrow. And it's Tisha B'Av 2023, United Kingdom, Great Britain.
Very good, very good. So get a hold of that. It's speaking of Israel and what happened then, but what's happening now. Jacob, real quick, I know we got to finish catching up. Many headlines. Israel's on the brink of civil war. This is only the beginning. Mossad chief warns that he's not gonna be on the wrong side of history. Heart condition for Bibi. He's had to have surgery, cancel some trips. He's meeting with Xi of China pretty soon. They got the Abraham Accord led by Jake Sullivan putting pressure on Israel. All that happening within the Tisha B'Av season. I'm going to say it's not coincidence, but this is something that's going on in Israel now, in the brink of civil war. There's no trust in the government. Judiciary reforms have been passed on Monday. We'll turn it over to you. Encapsulate that, unpack it. Tell us what you know.
Tisha B'Av also launches a 40-day period leading up to the high holidays and the month of Tishrei, which is when Rosh Hashanah, as it's called now, the Feast of Trumpets, followed by the Days of Awe and Yom Kippur take place. All of these things have important prophetic meanings scripturally for the return of Christ and for the future of Israel relative to the return of Christ. But what you see happening in Israel right now, it's not just that it's happening at this time of year, as you correctly point out. You see the Biden administration or the Joe Biden administration building on the achievements of the Trump administration. It was Jared Kushner who negotiated the Abraham Accords, and now Biden is building on it. He's so happy to denounce what Trump did until it's in his perceived political advantage to build on.
Of course.
Absolute hypocrisy. It's like when Barack Obama tried to take credit for killing Osama bin Laden, when in fact he denounced Bush, and I didn't like Bush, but he denounced Bush's policies in foreign and defense matters, only to reappoint Bush's Secretary of Defense as his own Secretary of Defense, a Republican. After you run against Bush and denounce what happened in Iraq and so forth, and the way Bush is handling the war on terror, you reappoint Bush's Secretary of Defense and most of the counterterrorism team of the Obama administration were the same people in the Bush administration. And then he takes credit for it, of course. Again, he's a hypocrite among hypocrites. But this is what's happening. They build on something that they didn't plant the foundation for and expect you to ignore that they are building on something that the Trump administration achieved. Now, I always raise the caveat of the Abraham Accords because the Antichrist will bring a false peace to the Middle East, and it will use a combination of religion and politics and economics to do it. So the Abraham Accords can be seen as a good thing with temporal eyes, but it is a sinister thing when seen with scriptural eyes. Be that as it may, let's look at what's happening. The Biden administration has taken sides in the internal affairs in Israel. They are backing the Israeli left against Netanyahu. They want to do to Netanyahu in Israel what they want to do to Trump in the United States. Same game, same devices. It's a Biden administration interfering in the internal affairs of Israel. One of the key players in this will be Ehud Barak, former prime minister. Ehud Barak will be one of the people looking to depose Netanyahu. But that is what's happening. It is American interference in the internal affairs of Israel. I can see why America would interfere in the internal affairs of a hostile nation. But why a friendly nation? Israel means America no harm by any means. Nonetheless, there is an agenda, and that's what the Biden administration is doing. Jake Sullivan cannot be trusted as far as you can throw him. That man has no integrity diplomatically. He's the national security advisor of the Biden administration, and he is no friend of Israel. In fact, I would go so far as to say he's no friend of the United States, but he's certainly no friend of Israel. This is what is happening.
Now they're dealing with the Saudi peace deal, which is a very interesting deal. It's based on the Abrahamic Accord with some Israeli-Saudi normalization deal, economic deals and stuff like that. But it's got some interesting things. Saudis want a nuclear program. They want to be oversight by the United States. The United States wants them to stop the Yemenite war. They don't want to fight against Yemen, to just let them be. This is quite a bit that the Saudis are asking for. Not only a nuclear program, but more advanced weapons by the U.S. In exchange, the U.S. wants the Saudi-Chinese connection to stop. And of course, Israel wants to build on the West Bank, which is completely against the Biden policy and administration. They even thought about, changing some of long story, but the portions of Area C to be transferred to portion of Area A and all that stuff, which gets a little complicated if you don't know the what's going on in the West Bank. But is this a deal that the Biden administration is going to force down the throat of Netanyahu, saying, take it or leave it, we're making this deal with Iran, not Iran, but I guess Iran would be the big winner, with the Saudis?
They will not be able to do anything in terms of a rapprochement between the Saudi Arabians and the Israelis without Israel, obviously. So therefore, as long as Netanyahu is there, Biden is not going to get what he wants beyond a limited point. Therefore, he wants to get rid of Netanyahu.
That's right.
That's basically what it comes to. Now, let's go back to the Saudi side of the equation. The Saudis are playing China against America. They feel abandoned by America. Not that we owe the Saudis anything, but the war in Yemen is a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. It is a war between Sunni and Shia. And the Saudi Arabians don't trust the Iranians, despite the cessation of hostilities negotiated by China. They don't trust the Iranians. They know they can't. And it goes back too far back to the 8th century, to the Battle of Karbala. It's not going to end. So the Saudi Arabians are playing politics and biding their time. They do it with oil production, how much they produce. They do it with cooperation with Russia, with China, with anyone else. The Saudi Arabians have certain interests with the Israelis, a common enemy in Iran. And Israel is the most powerful country in the Middle East. Second, the benefits of Israeli high tech. Remember, the Silicon Valley of the Middle East is Israel. The area, some of it's in Haifa around the Technion, but most of it is north of Tel Aviv and Herzliya. There's a high-tech belt. That is the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. To build the city of Neon and to make an alternative source of commerce and revenue to oil in the long term, the Saudi Arabians definitely see an advantage in negotiating commercially with the Israelis. That is another consideration, and it's not being talked about enough, but it's certainly a factor in the thinking of both the Israelis and the Saudi Arabians, the city of Neon, which is to be built exactly, almost certainly, where the real Mount Horeb was, where the Ten Commandments were given to Moses. It's the geography.
What they have planned is really interesting.
Yes.
What they have planned for that city is a whole.
But the geography is of spiritual and theological significance.
Absolutely.
Okay, that is another factor. The House of Saud is in a precarious position. The Wahhabis are in a precarious position. There's a reaction against Salafist Islam, ultra-fundamentalist Islam. Saudi Arabians are trying to balance a lot of things. MLB is trying to juggle several things at the same time. But what they really want, what the Saudis really want, in order to decouple from China and Russia, and to put it back the way it had been was, in terms of Saudi-American relations, what they really want is the following. They want Saudi Arabia to have the same status as Israel, as a non-NATO ally of the United States. They want to be treated the way the Israelis are and have the same status, not just functionally, but they want it engraved in some kind of a treaty, ideally.
Interesting. Yeah.
The closest person to achieve that was Anwar Sadat.
Before,
In Camp David, they had some kind of negotiated equity in terms of military and economic assistance to both Israel and Egypt. That was part of Camp David. He came the closest to getting anything like that. But let's look a bit further. What is also a factor is the outcome of the West Bank. Israel has a growing population. You can't put all these people on the Negev. They have to be closer to the sea, to the ports. They have to be closer to the metropolitan areas, which is Tel Aviv, Haifa, etc. There's going to be further Israeli expansion into the West Bank for no other reason now, other than they need the space and you've got to put the people somewhere. Ehud Barak offered the so-called Palestinian Arabs a state on the West Bank where the Israelis would keep a small amount of settlements and give 3% of Israel's own land in exchange.
Wow.
With a compromise on Jerusalem, that East Jerusalem could be their capital. And Arafat turned it down and went to bombing bus stops and bus stations and shooting at school buses instead. Even Ehud Barak from the left, offered the Palestinians another state in addition to the ones they already de facto have in Gaza and Jordan. Let's remember, they're already, in de facto terms, 2 Palestinian states. They were offered a third one, and they turned it down by the Israeli left. What Biden and Sullivan are doing, thinking that they're going to change their mind, is ridiculous. They're not going to change their mind unless they had some kind of major economic impetus, such as Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
But they have to get rid of Netanyahu.
Yep. I think that's the writing on the wall, if I want to put it in biblical terms. That's what the writing on the wall shows. Interesting stuff. So as we're winding down, catching up, David, any thoughts on before we wind down to backstage? We got the questions coming in. Thank you guys for sending the questions. Go ahead, David. Yeah. Muted. Sorry. We lost him.
I thought you were saying Davy. So.
Oh, no, David.
Yeah, the Middle East is in trouble. Everything. My worry is that during this time, if the Jews have a civil war, will it be time for a strike on them by not only those that are internally enemies, but the external enemies, feeling that this is it. So God forbid that happens. So, but great review, Jacob.
Yeah, as Jacob's always quoting this part of scripture, he who keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And, amen. And of course, the concern is always, obviously, the believers in Israel, the gospel being preached in Israel, which Moriel is heavily involved in, and by God's grace will continue to do so. But the political landscape, Jacob, you talked about it even last year or the year before, it's changing in Israel rather rapidly, and especially after the elections and judiciary reform. It's becoming very difficult. And of course, even in the Knesset, you have the right wing, extreme right wing, being very anti-Messianic believers. So it is changing and it's becoming more difficult, but by God's grace, we'll continue on. So thank you guys for being on Catching Up. We'll be moving on to backstage to deal with a couple of things, which is it'll be the WorldCoin and UBI, Universal Basic Income. And of course, did they really find the ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, we'll ask Jacob what this archaeologist had to say. It's a pretty interesting video that they put out, and we'll be dealing with the questions as well. So God bless you guys. We'll be jumping out of Facebook Live and YouTube, and we'll be heading out to, of course, if you're already on Rumble, stay there. If you're not on Rumble yet, get there. If you're not on Memorial.tv, get there. If you're not on memorialtv.org, get there. If you're Instagram, not Instagram, we're not doing Instagram, Telegram and Vimeo. I suppose you can stay there, but join us on the other platforms. They're friendly to us as well, so they let us say what we need to say. So God bless you guys. We'll see you on Backstage in just a couple of minutes.